you don't need 12 gauge stereo cables to power a 1 watt supply of music. I mean, this is a stereo subject now. I guess I'm off on a tangent. The stereo subject is most listening is done at well under 90 decibels. I mean, 90 decibels is loud. Get yourself a dB meter and turn it on when you're listening to your music, and I guarantee you 90 decibels is loud. Well, most speakers are efficient at that level at only 1 watt. So anywhere between 90 and 100 decibels, typically you're only pushing a watt through your speaker. Now it's 100 decibels at, a meter away from the front. I agree, you got to check that, but still, the point is that it's only 1 watt that you're pushing through these cables. Now, 16 gauge lamp wire can handle 1850 watts. So I don't think pumping 1 watt through, a cable is that big of a deal. So by natural thought then, why would one need 12 gauge or 10 gauge or 8 gauge wire to process signals that are a watt or under typically? And still, let's say they're 100. Let's say you're pushing your amp as hard as you can push it, and they're at 100 watts. Your average space heater, electric space heater in the United States, will consume about 1,850 watts when it's on high. We're talking compare that to 1 watt going through from your power amp, or compare that to 100 watts. I'm sorry. Compare that to 100 watts going through your power amp. The heater draws 1850. The speakers draw 100. I think you're okay with 18 gauge wire. That's what I'm saying. And this is probably the reason why, if you really get into vintage speakers, you'll find that a lot of the old terminal posts on vintage speakers were so small that all you could put in them was 18 gauge wire. I mean, I just had a pair of JBL S99s, and that was the case with those. It's got a really tiny hole. You can't stuff 16 gauge in it even. I mean, barely. You can wind it up on the end and stick it in there, but it's really set up for 18 gauge wire. So if that's how dumb they were in the 1960s, or how smart they were in the 1960s, and someone invented the wonderful cable demand, stereo cable demand, then I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think it's wonderful. But I'll stick with what I have. Now, I'm going to be quick to say I'm not I'm discounting other things that are important about cables, like connections, shielding. So I don't want all people to be turned off that I'm not onto good cables. I'm into good cables. It's just that from a pure power perspective, you don't have to worry about it. So the difference between 16 and 8 gauge, it shouldn't make a difference. It just shouldn't make a difference. And I'll take this as from Gauss's law, which Gauss's law states that all of the electrical charge on a conductor must reside on the outside. It's not in the center at all. It's on the outside. So all that matters is the surface area of the outside. Now that increases with gauge, of course, but again, 1 watt compared to 1,850 watts. Maybe a reader can a listener for standard household conduit that goes into a house. What is it? 12 gauge? You'll have to. Can a reader comment on what standard household wiring can support in terms of power? And then maybe even state, if you had 8 gauge, I mean, how much more power could that handle? Just to give listeners here and watchers an idea of how ridiculous this cable thing is, at least from a power perspective.